Hello and welcome. Today, as part of the Geopolitical Risk Index project, we're joined by someone whose work sits at the intersection of diplomacy, academia, and business, Professor Thales Castro, the Honorary Consul of Malta in Recife, who's also a recognized scholar in the field of international relations and political science. And he is the founder and CEO of CogniTrends, a US-based firm specialized in geopolitical risk assessment and strategic advisory for companies operating across complex global environments. Thales is also the author of Teoria das Relações Internacionais, the Theory of International Relations, this book, where he introduces an index of international power, which is a framework that he designed to assess the geopolitical weight of nations in today's multipolar world. We're very pleased to have him with us to discuss how companies, particularly in the United States, are adapting to growing geopolitical uncertainty and how academic frameworks and diplomatic insights can contribute to risk analysis in the private sector. So, Professor Castro, thank you very much for being here. So first of all, I kindly ask you to briefly introduce CogniTrends. So when was this company founded and what motivated you to create this firm specialized in geopolitical risk and global security assessment?
Well, thank you very much, Luigi. Thank you very much for the opportunity of being here. I'd like to say that it's a pleasure of us establishing this connection and also establishing this bridge of opportunities with your broader audience. CogniTrends started as a natural market dynamics for understanding geopolitics as part of a intervening variable of companies all over the world. Not long ago, we used to understand equivocally that geopolitics was only focused on state-centered policies, on history of international relations at the macro level. But a couple of decades from now, I increasingly see the private sector worldwide understanding the crucial urgency and necessity of bringing forth geopolitics and geoeconomics into their own business strategies. So as a result of this, I founded CogniTrends to provide these tailor-made services for both the private sector and also for the public sector. Due to the fact that I have had this experience as Honorary Consul of the Republic of Malta in Recife, Brazil for the past 15 years, I noticed that most of the private sector actors that approached us, they wanted to understand the broader picture. And the broader picture involved this very sensitive areas such as risk assessment, geopolitical paradigms, and also how these businesses can have a track record of success in providing themselves and their services to clients domestically and abroad. So that niche, that specific segment was crucial for us to establish CogniTrends. And as of now, we're increasingly gaining clientele in Brazil and also here in the United States, where I'm currently based.
Professor, thank you very much for your answer to this question, which leads me to the second question, which is about what services have the highest demand in CogniTrends? So when US firms approach you to adapt their strategies to geopolitical risk, what kinds of services do you observe that they demand for the most? So do you think they prioritize intelligence, scenario planning, lobbying, or other types of support? What do you think they prefer?
Luigi, that's a great question. Most of my US-based clients, they want to understand how does the macro geopolitical risk environment affect their specific foreign trade performances. This is a very delicate area because it involves, political areas, macro political decisions in terms of their long-term planning, in terms of market, insertion in LATAM countries and other correlated areas. So we also have a increasing demand from the public sector in Brazil and in other countries where they want to understand the behavior of foreign actors in Latin America slash specifically in Brazil. And by foreign actors, I mean the diplomatic slash political relations of this actor and how they can bring forth, uh, the volatility, vulnerability, of all of these actors, of all of these interactions, better speaking. So again, private sector clients and public sector clients, they differ substantially in the sense of, trying to grasp their specific needs in performance with the overall framework of geopolitical scenarios. But what unites both public clients, public sector clients, and private sector, market sector clients is the fact that geopolitics plays a substantial role in the determination of their present and their future strategies. And that's where we come in with our specific tailor-made services. We provide a very tailor-made, clear-cut, understanding of how these actors can benefit not only from globalization process, but also they can navigate the complexities and intricacies of geopolitics in many levels.
Thank you very much for your answer. So, looking at this time today, where we are facing ongoing trade tensions and shifts in US foreign policy, and based on the cases you've followed through CogniTrends and also beyond, how do you think American companies are responding to this current geopolitical environment?
Well, that will increasingly depend on their segment. Let's say the mass, business conglomerates of the, let's say, oil and gas sector. They are highly dependent upon the careful understanding of geopolitics. Because the oil and gas sector, for instance, it's a sector that is highly affected by domestic decision-making processes of many countries abroad. And I'm not only talking about the Middle East, where most of the OPEC member states are located, but also in other non-OPEC member state areas. So it depends on the segment these companies are engaged. If we take, for instance, the big techs, if we take, for instance, information technology companies, they're also interested in geopolitical analysis because they want to understand how much of risk tolerance they can accept in going into a new international endeavor, or they can maintain, ongoing operations in determined specific countries. So it will depend tremendously on the segment of these companies, of these actors, and it will also depend highly on their long-term goals, their long-term strategies. Having said that, all of these business conglomerates, they want to understand, they want to make sense of all of these, complex, muddy, gray areas of the international relations profile in bringing forth into wise decision-making process for themselves, for their companies.
Thank you very much. And so this leads me to another question, which is, how does CogniTrends approach this analysis of geopolitical risk? Do you tend to use more qualitative methods, quantitative tools, or a combination of both to answer these questions companies ask you?
Excellent question, Luigi. I'm very glad that you asked me that. We have three major areas of services. The first one, it is called the international trade through competitive leverage. And with that, we do planning, international trade planning, market intelligence, competitive strategies. The second one, it involves analytical tools and research. And by analytical tools, we have developed two major models where we apply in concrete case studies for our clients. One is called PIMA, which is political international preventive international market assessment. In this specific model, we have a multivariable analysis. We use a lot of statistics to providing, this specific tailor-made area of interest for the client. And we also use the index that I developed back in 2012 when the first edition of my book, Teoria das Relações Internacionais, was released, which is the PI index, or Índice do Poder Internacional. So we use these two models, and they sometimes they overlap, sometimes they're complementary, sometimes they build forces into a very solid uh, um, understanding of what the clients need and how they want to approach their objectives. And the last segment, the third last segment, is advisory and consulting. And through that, we analyze, we use many models, many strategies, many approaches. I'm saying these three major areas where we provide services for our client because I want to specifically answer your question. So we use interchangeably both qualitative and quantitative methods. And in addition to these equitable balance between qualitative and quantitative methods, we also apply a lot of OSINT, open source information intelligence, open source information tools. We also use, which is a unique factor to us, a distinguishing competitive advantages for us, for our company, which is human-int. Human-int, it's different from OSINT because it involves actors, observer, players in the field, in the area that provide reporting, respecting all compliance norms, obviously, for our clients and ourselves. So we have OSINT techniques and also human-int techniques. And again, they're used interchangeably. Sometimes we use more OSINT with a technology-based parameter. Sometimes we need more of a human-int strategy, personal contacts, networking. And that's perhaps one of the key features of our unique approach to the market and to our clients.
It's interesting that you have just commented also about the International Power Index, which is presented in your book, Theory of International Relations, Teoria das Relações Internacionais. And for those unfamiliar, this is a framework developed by Professor Castro meant to consider power as a multidimensional concept. So he considers factors such as diplomatic reach, military capacity, economic weight, and also cultural influence of countries. So my question to you is, how do you think this framework helps us understand the strategic behavior of states in the current environment? And do you see any connections between national power and how companies perceive or respond to geopolitical risk?
Absolutely. There's a clear connection. There's um, a clear thread of connection between national power and the way companies respond to these national powers, especially in the hegemonic cycle of countries. And by hegemonic cycle of countries, I have a specific model also portrayed in my book, Theory of International Relations. And when countries reach an aspiring role to change the status quo of international relations, they are increasingly trying to change the overall rules of engagement at the international level. So that means these specific countries, they understand themselves, they see themselves, they portray themselves as countries with higher power quotient, countries with a higher political capital. And having said that, usually private sector actors of these countries, they try to respond in the same way. They want to expand, they want to project, they want to neo-colonize, if we may so say it, other markets by the fact that these countries are giving full support in their increased power projection worldwide. So it's a very interesting element how my power index, international power index (PE), actually it's a very vivid, it's a very a strong reality. Many years after I launched it, and what drove me in terms of interest to actually study it and research it and project it was way into my undergrad education in Pennsylvania, where I had this international relations class, Theory 101, introductory class to international relations. And I was struck by the fact that we could actually measure the powers of states and we can establish sort of a hierarchy of these states' engagements. So that was fascinating to me, and that drove me into, diving deep into this research, which years later, was articulated into the International Power Index. I'm very glad, Luigi, that you made this reference to my PE research. There are many decades of research on that specific index, and I appreciate the fact that you mentioned it.
Thank you so much. That index is, in fact, I think one of the best things, the most interesting things you wrote on this book, Theory of International Relations, and it's something that I'll always keep with me, which I find very interesting to understand the power of states and understand in a very conceptual and very systematic way this hierarchy of power among different states.
Thank you. It's amazing. Yeah. I appreciate it.
So now, considering your experience, both as a diplomat and as an entrepreneur currently, do you see any differences on this interpretation of geopolitical risk in diplomacy and in business? What differences do you see between these two environments and their interpretations and responses to geopolitical risk?
I've written an article not recently, a couple of years ago. Well, time is flying so much, in which I establish a sort of a symbolic understanding of the nature of your question, which is very, very interesting, by the way, Luigi. I say that diplomacy has a symbolic, quandary of a handshake, right? In Portuguese, I call it a pena. Pena meaning the old writing form where treaties were drafted and signed. So diplomacy, in its nature, in its core nature, has the ability to build consensus, to enhance cooperation, and bring forth viable solutions to countries with all of its foreign policy differences. The other symbolism that I'd like to explore with you is the symbolism of the military might, the military force, the military engagement. And whenever we refer to this specific segment, I particularly refer to it as the sword. The sword has a symbolism of strength, of might, of forced behavior, of violence, if we also consider that as a variable. So with the military aspect of international relations and foreign policy decision making, that's a different approach. It's not diplomatic, where consensus is being built and achieved. With military might, there is a very persuasive, capital of engagement, whereas the force and the violence, they play a substantial role. And the last, symbolic element is the intelligence sector. which I refer in Portuguese as o segredo. In Portuguese, I use this trinomial relationship as a pena, a espada e o segredo. In other words, the old form of writing, let's call it the handshake. In English would be better. I refer to this way: the sword and the secret. Through intelligence services, national actors can play a very important role in understanding, in managing, in processing these information, and grasping a better grip understanding of how countries react and how they can, envision their future, understand their vulnerabilities, and foreshadow how they can be prevented. Why am I saying all of these three variables? A pena, a espada, e o segredo. Because all of these connect into geopolitical analysis and risk, either through the handshake, the diplomatic spectrum, through the military might, or intelligence services worldwide. CogniTrends was created and founded in two of these symbolic values, symbolic paradigms: the secret, meaning intelligence services, and the handshake. So we unite the experience of diplomacy, consular diplomacy, with the fact that once you are a diplomatic actor, you do, very critical analysis, which provides intelligence services to many actors, both public and private actors. Having said that, all of these three interconnect. They are fluid. They are well equipped in terms of a core dynamics of bringing forth geopolitics, geopolitical risk, geoeconomic topics into the scenario.
Thank you very much for your answer. So now we've talked about your experience as a diplomat, your experience also as an entrepreneur. And now, so my final question is, considering you as both a professor, an entrepreneur, and a diplomat, and I ask you, what do you believe are the key skills and tools that business leaders will need to navigate in this environment of geopolitical uncertainty and geopolitical risk in the coming decade?
They need to be very open minded to bringing other variables in terms of risk, in terms of planning, in terms of decision making, which these factors they go beyond the mere behavior of their companies, their segments, their conglomerates themselves. What I'm trying to say is they need to be open minded by the fact that other factors, other variables do play a substantial intervening role in the success of their respective companies. And when I mention about the fact that they need to be open minded, they need to also think critically. They need to understand multi-variable complexities of these worlds. Sometimes a manager, a CEO or a COO or a CFO, they are very keen in their skills in understanding their companies, their competitors, and their markets. But they lack the necessary understanding of international relations, geopolitics, geoeconomics, and risk at the grassroots of their part of internal dynamics. So they need to understand this is not a context they can avoid. Not only thinking about human resources, financial processes, market dynamics, competitiveness, marketing. This is all fantastic. This is all the core action of these companies. But they need also to add one variable, which is international relations, geopolitics, geoeconomics, all through the scope and the lenses of risk. Because a geopolitical risk can destroy the company's A geopolitical risk that has not been planned or envisioned can indeed harm their moral exposition. A non-seen geopolitical risk can diminish their market share. A geopolitical risk can indeed bring forth a lot of unemployment in many sectors across the nation's national business ecosystem. So, having said that, I believe these are very important characteristics, very important skills, very important toolkits. These managers, these presidents, CEOs, you name it, need to have to understanding that the survival of these globalized companies, they need to take into consideration international relations, geopolitics, and geoeconomics.
Thank you very much for your answer. This, I think, in fact, it's very important to consider geopolitical risk, and this is something that we are looking for in this project for the future generation of business leaders to consider also geopolitical risk, international relations, and geoeconomics in their future decisions that will have to be made by the next generation of CEOs. So I think what the work you are doing and what you have said now is very important to be considered by the next entrepreneurs and the next generation of people working in this sphere of multinational companies in such a globalized world. So, Professor Castro, thank you so much for your availability. Thank you so much for being here in this interview. It was very interesting to hear from you and from insights from someone who has a very multidimensional perspective, working as both a professor, a diplomat, an entrepreneur, and I think this will be of a great value to everyone who will watch this interview. So thank you so much, and hope to see you again other times.
Grazie mille, Luigi. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure talking to you and having contact with your broad audience. Please do not hesitate in contacting me or CogniTrends, my company here in the US, for questions, for potential solutions in the broad base area of clients. And also, to having academia, research, international research. So both segments, they unite and they enhance our international engagement. So thank you very much. Once again, it's been a great pleasure, and all the best to everyone.